This is Nobody Yet, podcast number 3. I'm Eric, and I'm recording this on December 3rd at 11:09 p.m. Okay, I'm pretty excited for this one, and I just got off a dinner with a couple of friends I've seen a bit, so I'm pretty riled up. I'm pretty pumped, and I'm excited for this episode. This is something I've been thinking for a very long time, and is one of the reasons why I started this podcast in the first place, is to document thoughts like this. For this episode, I'm going to talk about my perceptions of an ideal life and what exactly I'm optimizing for. These two questions will be things that I'll be revisiting over time, ideally over a year, 3 years, so on and so forth, so I could see how my concept of an ideal life and what exactly I'm optimizing for changes over time as my surrounding circumstances, the settings, and the contexts in which I work in change. So this will be a topic that I'll revisit. Of course, not every week, but after a bit of time or after some significant development happen, I'll revisit this exact topic. Now, before diving into an ideal life and what I'm optimizing for, there's several asterisks I want to give. And these are pretty important with the context of this conversation, but as well as with this podcast in general. And I wish these are asterisks that I could give for every episode, but I don't want to bore you who may be listening to this and would not want me to say like the same thing over and over again for each episode. But the first asterisk I want to give is that where I am currently in life. So everything you're hearing is from me in the present, which I guess when you listen to this, it will be the past, but it will be me in my current conditions. I'm currently 25. I just moved to New York a month ago in late October. I moved from Chicago, where I worked at a trading firm for 2 years. I graduated from Toronto and I moved directly to Chicago. Right now, my life is centered around work since I'm ramping up. So I'm electing to devote a lot of time towards work. The gym, since powerlifting is something I compete in and something I'm hoping to get back into after some sickness and some injuries. Of course, I'm also meeting a lot of new people in New York. So going out, drinks, dinners, etc., whatever that happens there. Outside of this, my only other hobbies essentially surround reading, writing, and I guess now this podcast. Essentially synthesizing information to gather more insights and explore my curiosities about me, about life in general. Another point to note is that I'm single at the moment, and this is very important to note, given what I'm about to elaborate on what I'm optimizing for an ideal life. And this will contrast, hopefully, who I would be a decade down the line when I'm 35 and I have a family and I'm more settled. So this is very important context as well. In that aspect, I have the privilege to be very selfish right now. I don't have to think about anything else other than myself. Of course, save for friends and family, but major decisions, I only need to think about what's best for me at the moment. I don't have any further responsibilities in that regard. I could fully focus on trying to imagine and execute upon my unbridled ambition towards what I want to do in the next 3, 5, and 10 years. So this is that perception of an ideal life and what I'm optimizing for. So that overall is the first asterisk of where I am in life. The second asterisk that I want to give is, well, given that I'm only 25, I'm also very young, or that would mean I am very young. And because I'm very young, a lot of things I'm going to say are going to be very wrong, or they're going to appear very wrong 5 or however many years down the road. And maybe you don't even have to wait that long. Maybe you think what I'm saying is already wrong, and that's okay. If we go back to everyone's optimizing for different things, you don't have to agree with what I'm going to say. I myself don't have to agree with what I'm about to say. Maybe 1 year down the line. Maybe 1 year down the line, a lot of things changed. I have new responsibilities. Maybe I'm in a serious relationship. Maybe I switch jobs. I switch careers. I don't know what will be in a year. All I know is that this is who I am at this moment, and I'm here to document that. So in that regard, you might think, or you might judge that here is this idiot talking on a mic, or here's this 25-year-old idiot talking on a mic who haven't experienced the world, and To which I will agree. I am an idiot 25-year-old talking on a mic who haven't experienced the world. But these are my exact thoughts at this moment. And this is what's valuable, at least for me, for when I could look back on this and say, that was me at that moment. So that's the second asterisk that I want to give, that you might not agree and I might be wrong to anyone. And I might even be wrong to myself later in the future. But this is who I am at this moment. So with that said, here we go. First, an ideal life. So when I think on an ideal life, my concept of an ideal life changed over time. When I was a kid, my first concept of an ideal life was obviously one that was centered around happiness. I wanted to be happy, like anyone else. But the happiness I defined as a kid was something that was very naive. And it was centered around the fact that I haven't stepped out significantly from the kilometer radius around my house. Obviously, I've traveled with family, but I haven't traveled with friends or haven't traveled with myself yet. I haven't gone to university. I've gone to high school at this point. I was probably 16, so that's grade 10 or grade 9. And majority of my time is spent in that 1 kilometer radius where I also live pretty close to my high school at the time. So centered around happiness as a kid, I saw this as being able to play video games whenever I wanted, being able to just talk with friends whenever I wanted, and just enjoying life, having fun. The concept of work didn't come yet. It was very much hedonism, because hedonism was the only thing I knew as a kid. So it was one that was centered around happiness. And even when I'm older, I could see myself following this path of just focusing on happiness. And that's not a bad path to follow. But there's a little bit more development after that. So in university, I began reading. And the first book that I read was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And this is one of the basic books. And maybe not basic, but it is one of the common books that people read about psychology or about life direction. And the general synopsis of this book is that Viktor Frankl is a psychologist who founded a therapy, a type of therapy called logotherapy, in which is focused on determining or bringing the patient to find meaning in their life to continue living. Maybe I'm butchering that exact definition, but it goes along those lines. He developed his practices, or at least in the book, he talks about logotherapy and the different ways to find meaning. And he expresses these, or he illustrates these through his experiences at a concentration camp in World War II. And he talks about how he found meaning in his context to control his mind in the face of irreversible, unable to be moved, unable to be avoided suffering. And that was his method of finding meaning. There was 2 other ways that he cited to find meaning, one of which was doing a certain deed. So this is like pursuing a passion or pursuing an interest, a hobby or a job. And another one is meeting someone or experiencing something really profound. So that is raising a family or potentially traveling the world, because there's that itch that needs to be itched. But those were his 3 central tenets on finding meaning that he cited in the book. And this was something that I centered my concept of meaning, or a concept of an ideal life, when I was in university. It was no longer chasing happiness, because, of course, in university there was a lot of studying, and studying is many times not comfortable, and many times there's not a lot of happiness there. But there's a lot of meaning there, because it felt like I was going somewhere in life. It felt like I was getting better. It felt like I was actually realizing some part of the world that I wanted to see. And I had to sacrifice happiness for that. But in this meaning, or this generation of meaning university, happiness comes as a side product that Frankl also cites, that happiness does not need to be chased. Meaning needs to be chased, and happiness becomes a byproduct of meaning. So that was my second thought in terms of what an ideal life looked like, is one that's very centered around meaning. And that idea is still something that I resonate to this day. I still really much believe that there should be a chase in meaning over a chase in happiness, since if meaning is obtained or at least pursued, happiness would ensue. Now there's been a couple more books that I've read, and one general area of books that I've begun reading more are biographies, and specifically the biographies of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, who, of course, are two very famous investors and very rich, really successful, whatever. But what's so interesting about them is that not only are they good decision makers in terms of investments and finances and things like that, but they're also very wise, having seen so many different business people, personal friends, acquaintances, just life in general, and seen all the wisdoms and insights around it. And from them, they kind of espouse them, or at least they're documented in these books, in the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder letters, in the various biographies that are written about them. And I've consumed a lot about them. And that in itself helped define my central idea of what an ideal life looks like. At least right now, until, of course, I read more books or I meet more people and I really refine my idea of what an ideal life looks like. But here is my current crack of what ideal life looks like. It centers around 3 points. The first point is agency. This is something that Charlie Munger cited a lot in his initial reason to partner with Warren Buffett in the partnership of Berkshire Hathaway. At the time, Charlie Munger was a lawyer, and lawyers back then didn't make that much. So he desperately wanted money. But he didn't want money to be rich, but he wanted money to have that financial freedom to do whatever he wanted. And safe to say, he earned that and then some, is having that freedom. And agency is exactly that. Agency is being able to work on what you want to work on. It's to be with the people you want to be with. It's to live where you want to live and do what you want to do. It's essentially the who, what, where, when, and why, and being able to choose exactly what those questions are going to answer or, I guess, address. Having high agency is a good thing. At least I think of it is as a really good thing. But the flip side is that agency can also be very scary. It's like riding a roller coaster with no guardrails on. The roller coaster will take you to certain directions. It'll take you up, down, left, right. It'll take you wherever it takes you, and you have no control. Agency is the opposite. There's no tracks anymore. There's not even a cart. It's just you and flat land, and that's scary. But that's the beauty of agency in itself. There's no one to guide you, but that means that you got to guide yourself, and it means that you got to do whatever you want. And that, at least for me, is central to a core tenet of what an ideal life looks like. It means traveling whenever you want to travel. It means being obsessive over whatever you want to be obsessive over. It means marrying whoever you want to marry. It's taking life by the reins and having full control, irregardless of luck and fate and whatever. Those things would come, but it's still a core property of having agency to do whatever you want to do. The second part, in terms of ideal life that I see, is conviction. If agency is the freedom to do whatever, conviction is the obsession that pushes someone to achieve that agency, to pursue whatever that agency prescribes them. Is to have complete belief in the pursuits, to have such a profound interest in things that arouses a certain sense of curiosity for people to constantly ask questions and to try to find the answer to those questions, and to continuously chase those questions. This is the proverbial rabbit hole that people dive into when they search on YouTube. It's like watching video after video, but instead here it's not video after video, it's job after job, or it's hobby after hobby, it's interest after interest, or it's just one interest, just super deep. This is having that conviction. It's waking up and not being able to think of anything other than that thing to be obsessive over. It's a thing of having such profound curiosity in that thing, of wanting to tell everybody and not wanting to shut up about it. It's a thing about I guess I'll use curiosity again, but it's kind of like being annoying. It's like you want to tell everyone, and they just want to tell you to shut up, and they want to talk about other things, but you only really want to talk about that one thing that you're curious in, or you have a very high belief in. That's conviction. And I think that gives agency so much more beauty. So agency is like that freedom to do whatever you want, and conviction is the power to try to do whatever you want to do. The third one in an ideal life is morality. If agency is the freedom, conviction is the purpose to do so, morality is very much, I guess, another sense of the how. It's having the good character to exert that agency and that conviction. It's a combination of, I guess, stoicism, of trying to control an inner dialogue or inner mental frame of who you are as the world around you happens. It's similar to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning of the attitude that we take towards unavoidable suffering. It's being a good person. And maybe pretty foolishly, I feel like this transcends across all religions. As a tangent, I asked my dad in middle school or very early on why my family's not religious. And he said, well, and note that none of us are religious, so maybe we are incorrect here. But he said that the core tenet of religion, of all religions, is to be a good person. They just have different ways to do so. But the core tenet is to be a good person. So if I try to be a good person and I die and I appear ahead of God, I appear before God, and he judges me and says, we cannot admit you to heaven or paradise because you did not believe in me, even though he was a good person, then he would argue that that's not a good God. And to many extents, I don't know if I agree on the context of belief, of whether that's a good or bad God, since I'm not religious. But I at least agree with the fact that something that cannot be judged is morality, is being that good person. And of course, this is also very heavily inspired by Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, because not only have they risen to the top of the food chain of investors, one that's filled with convicts and people who cheat, people who lie, people who do illegal things. They rose to the top of that world while keeping their character, or keeping their peace of mind. People look up to them for a reason, and they have dedicated followers for a reason. People trek all the way to Omaha, Nebraska every year for their like capitalism in the Woodstocks or something like that, their annual shareholder meeting for Berkshire Hathaway. And it's a whole big event that spurs the whole Omaha economy. That is what being a good person is like. And I think that is a central tenet of one of the three to what an ideal life looks like. An ideal life is one that has agency, is one that has high conviction, and is one that has high morality. That's my current view of an ideal life at this age. Now, what I'm optimizing for. What I'm optimizing for is, of course, inspired partly from what I believe a good life looks like. What I'm optimizing for trickles down if you kind of regress it into my actions on a day-to-day. It informs me what I should be doing on a day-to-day basis. It informs me the goals I should be having on a weekly basis. It informs where I believe I should be a month from now. It informs the people I want to be around. It informs the things that I want to do. It forms how I want to structure my life and what I want to work on. For me, what I'm optimizing for is at the central of my thought. I think about it very often, almost every day. I think pretty much every day at this point. And because I'm so obsessed over it, it is something I desperately want to record down before I A, forget about it, and B, before they change as I get older. And if they change, I hope I record that as well. But here we go. What I'm optimizing for. The first thing I'm optimizing for is to be in constant pursuit. Something I've noticed in my life is that the happiest moments of my life have been not when I've achieved, but when I'm on the path to achieve, is when I'm working on something. And work, I don't want to define as like a 9 to 5 job. It can be, but I want to define work as, similar to my previous episode about work, as general progress made towards some goal or some vision that's desired. My happiest moments have been when I'm working towards something. I think about high school, when at the time I came from an average high school and I was working to try to get into the Ivy Leagues for a bachelor's degree. And I didn't even know what like the SATs were back then. But I just remember studying the SATs very late into a high school career, trying to figure it out, waking up early and just sleeping late, doing the whole, like, I guess, Rocky cutscene that you could do at that age. And even though I didn't get into the places I wanted to, and even though I didn't do a lot of things that high school students probably did, like go to parties and socialize a lot and saw their friends a lot, whatever, the grind that I think that I did, or that I reminisce about, and hopefully my memory is accurate, but the grind that I reminisce about in high school, I have absolutely no regret for. I loved that time. I loved that feeling of being so obsessed about wanting to get into the Ivy Leagues, to taste what winning feels like, to see what I could become, to figure out what that potential was like. That was something that was absolutely priceless. And the actual result doesn't matter that much. I reminisce about that process much more than the actual outcome. And when I juxtapose that, and of course the constant grind in university as well is one that I reminisce very happily about as well. I studied a lot in university. My first 2 years, I essentially didn't like drink until 21, which is end of junior year. And end of junior year, COVID hit already anyway, so nothing was going to happen. But I think about those first 2 years where I was just head down, just working, just every day, just work. I look back at those days with such fondness. It's strange. A lot of people think about all the fun times they've had in university. And it would be lying to say that I didn't have fun times. I did have a lot of fun times as well. And I met a lot of really cool people. But definitely one of the pillars of my enjoyment of university was the volume of work that I did. It's those like 2 a.m. nights where you sleep and waking up at like 8 to go to class at 9. And it's doing that every single day. I've been doing that on weekends. Of course, the class is not there, but still waking up to do more work. I like that. That was a very fun time for me. And do I have some regrets of not having more fun or going out? Maybe. Maybe I do. But I definitely have no regret of doing what I did and working as hard as I worked. And now, if I actually contrast high school and university with other times where I felt more sad, ironically, one of the times I felt more melancholic was after I left my most previous job. There was a span of a month between my current job and my previous one where I didn't work. And I was in the midst of moving and I did some traveling, but this was after the traveling and we're done moving. So I'm kind of just sitting there and sitting home back in Ottawa, back home in Canada. And felt like there's nothing to pursue. I just sat there. And I didn't really know what to do with myself. And it felt like every day I was just trying to get the day pass. So I was just doing anything to burn time. I was working out for a very long time. Even though I was injured, I was kind of sick. So that wasn't ideal. I was driving to the gym very slow. I was watching a lot of YouTube videos for no reason. There's just so many things I was just doing. And the common person would probably say, oh, this is just relaxing from burnout, which I agree to some degree. Maybe the first 2 days were okay, but after the third, it was too much. And maybe that was also what the vacation was. When I traveled after I left and before I started, I traveled for like around a week. But that feeling of just sitting there and doing nothing and not having several big goals to gnaw after, to chase after, for me just felt so empty. And from the emptiness ensued sadness and melancholy. So in that regard, the first thing I'm optimizing for is to be in constant pursuit. And the constant pursuit isn't so much just pick a goal, any goal, and chase after it. It's not like that. I don't work for no reason, or I don't be disciplined and try to chase things for no reason. There is a significant amount of intent because the goals I'm chasing after I desire so deeply. They're things that I obsess over. Very much similar to like myself as a child, obsessing over the Ivy Leagues. Now I obsess over other goals that I have. Goals in fitness, goals in careers, goals of what I want to do, goals of what I want to see. And there's a lot of things that I'm obsessing over right now that I'm very happy about. And it's the feeling of that pursuit of these things. And I don't know if I'm going to succeed. Obviously, when I reminisce, I could say I failed or not. Whether or not I obtained the goal is very binary. But now I'm working in that full uncertainty of whether or not I will succeed in these pursuits of these goals. And there's excitement there. And there's excitement in knowing that the sacrifices and the work and the commitment that I make now is in some part shaping who I am as I pursue these things. And that's very fulfilling. Another thing in terms of the goal and intent is that there's an overall intent as well. As much as it's nice to, at least for example in fitness, hit certain numbers for bench, deadlift, and squat. One goal, for example, is that I want to deadlift 500 pounds. So those are very much like goals of intent. There is also an overarching thing that I'm figuring out for myself. And this runs across all my disciplines that I pursue, fitness, career, etc., is that I want to figure out what's the limit for my potential. I want to figure out what I'm actually capable of and figure out what's there. Something that amazed me as a child was watching Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford. It was a famous speech. I believe he delivered it in 2005 or 2008 or something, but you can find it on YouTube. And as a child, I watched a speech. And as a child, I'm going to say specifically in grade 10. And this is specifically when I hatched the dream, my first dream, the first goal that I had to go into the Ivy League universities. But I watched that commencement speech every single day for like 2 years as I worked. And that was the first thing that really inspired me to just get off my ass and do something with my life. And as I watched it, Steve Jobs wasn't alive. He died already. And there's something very moving in that here's someone espousing wisdom from his own life. And not just any ordinary life, but one in which he fundamentally shifted the trajectory of technology. He changed people's habits. In some ways, he touches our daily lives in every single capacity. The current smartphone wouldn't be what it's like without his innovations. Not to mention like the very devices that more than half of us Apple users have in our pockets. This is a man of great influence. And yet, he's not invincible. He's very mortal, and he died. And this is a lesson that I mentioned previously, and I'm sure will come again in later conversations as well, of mortality, death, and just everyone being mortal. But the fact that this man perished shows that people who are mortal, like Steve Jobs, has a significant potential to impact the whole course of human history. And in that sense, I like to chalk it to unlimited potential. And if he's immortal, and I know I'm immortal, I definitely know I'm a human. I definitely seen me bleed before. But if he's immortal and he has unlimited potential and I'm immortal, that would mean that I also may have unlimited potential. I don't know for certain yet because I haven't achieved, of course, anything on his scale yet. But at least there's some inclination that something may be there. And that's something, in my opinion, is worth figuring out and is worth pursuing. So that is the central overall goal towards the concept of being in constant pursuit, is to figure out what that ceiling looks like. What does that ceiling look like in terms of a profession? What does it look like in terms of technology, for me specifically, since I'm in software? What does that look like in terms of fitness, in terms of powerlifting? Where does my biology actually take me? What is the lowest amount of body fat I could get? What is the most I could squat and deadlift and bench? Those are all questions I'm curious about. So, yeah, constant pursuit, figuring out my ceiling, intention with goals. The second thing I'm optimizing for is the exploration of curiosities. This kind of came out when I was talking previously about conviction, of having a complete belief in pursuits. And this is very similar. It's for me trying to fulfill what I have profound interest in. I think the world is so big. There's so many things that you can experience in this world. Obviously, you could travel anywhere in this world, and by just flying for 5 hours or 6 hours, you could land in a culture that's completely different from what you're used to. You could probably even fly 1 hour to like the rural plains of Illinois or something, or like South Dakota, and that would be a complete culture shock as well, even within the same country. That is all to say, there's many different life experiences there. And the people who inhabit the lands, even the ones who inhabit your very lands, in your very city, for me, in my very New York, there's so many people in New York, but each one of these people have their own unique lives and lessons that are all independently interesting to explore. And I think that in itself is very fulfilling to see and is very interesting to see. So in that sense, the world is so big. And I have that curiosity to explore the vastness of this world. And when I think about pursuing curiosities to satisfy, is not so much a focus on fleeting or long-term curiosities. It's just exploring curiosities. I was curious about sewing and high fashion and how that works in fashion. So I picked up a couple books about fashion. I read about Alexander McQueen and his arch nemesis, whose name is escaping my mind, who's currently the designer of... Does it have Acne Studios? Probably not. Don't quote me on that. But I read the books about Alexander McQueen. I watched his documentaries. I read Amatora, which is a book about Japanese fashion as it dates to World War II. And I picked up sewing. And when I look back on these curiosities, of course it's very trivial. I'm not going to pursue something in fashion, or at least not that I know of. And I'm definitely not going to pursue something in sewing, given that I gave up the hobby and I sold my sewing machine. But this was a fleeting curiosity. And there's also like longer term curiosities that I'm also like, of course, subscribing to. The biggest long-term curiosity that I'm subscribing to is the one I mentioned previously, is to figure out what my ceiling is like. That is very much a long-term curiosity that I'm figuring out and I'm constantly pursuing. In light of exploring curiosities, this means that to focus on things that I'm interested in also means to completely ignore anything that's not interesting. So this is, for me right now, it's literally avoiding like any drama that could happen in my life, or avoiding like tea that other people could have. Frankly, I'm not interested in those things anymore. I was in university and I thought it was really fun. But now, I don't want to kind of sound pretentious and say it's trivial, but I'm just not interested in those things. I'm interested in things that I think are cool, and I'm sure other people think are stupid, and that's fine. But I'm here to really just explore what I'm interested in. In terms of what this looks like in terms of what this looks like on a day-by-day action, this involves meeting a lot of people. I think it's very interesting meeting people from different walks of life. And I try to avoid this since there's always a bias of meeting people who are in your industry. For me, there's a bias of meeting people who are in tech because I'm in tech. But it's interesting meeting people who are not in tech, who walk different lives. In that sense, it's like being able to live, maybe not live, but peer into someone's life without actually living it. Of course, you can't ever live more than one lifetime. So, because I can't do that, I have to take what I could get, which is talking to people and seeing their experiences and kind of learning the lessons and the perspectives that they have. I think that's very interesting. It's not just people that are surrounding me or immediately surrounding me that I meet. There's also a lot of dead people that I meet, or a lot of people that are alive but just out of reach that I meet as well. And this is for reading biographies. This was a hobby that I developed pretty recently, and a lot of it, admittedly, was from listening to the Founders podcast by David Senra. Love the podcast, definitely recommend. But reading the biographies of those who have came before really illuminated so many things about myself that I found were really interesting. It made the world, in a way, less scary and more certain. The world doesn't seem like it's suspended by just some sort of happenstance or some rope that's going to snap at an instant whenever something wrong happens. By reading biographies, there's a sense of assurance there. It feels as if I'm standing upon the shoulders of giants who have moved worlds, who built empires, who have conquered, and who have failed. But it's standing on these shoulders of giants and having that imaginary idea of them now passing me and just everyone living right now the baton to do something great with our lives. They contributed so much to human progression, in the good way, in the bad way, in any way. So now is very much my responsibility to continue that in my way. So meeting those dead people and those alive people is something very inspiring, and also just tickles that curiosity of exploring the depth of the world being so big. It fills that bigness, it fills that vastness, and just makes me smile. It's just super delightful. Perhaps that's what I'm optimizing for. I'm just optimizing for happiness and meaning, and I'm just finding that in reading these biographies. I just think it's cool. Reading biographies, listening to podcasts. I think it's a wonderful thing that I'm doing, and I absolutely love for myself. The third thing that I'm optimizing for, and this might not be a surprise, but I'm optimizing for wisdom, introspection, and improvement. In the same wavelength of exploring curiosities, I'm very interested in figuring out life a little bit better. I always think life, maybe I could use past tense. I always thought life. I guess I still think life. I still think life is very scary in the sense that there's so many things that are uncertain. You don't know when you're going to die. You don't know when people around you are going to die. You don't know when everything just go to shit. You don't know like whether war could break out or famine or the economy could break. Obviously, there's the flip side of you don't know you could just win the lottery the next day. You could get the dream job. You have the dream partner. There's just a continuum of outcomes that could happen in life. And similar to the idea of agency, where that vastness is very scary. And at least my solution to that vastness is not don't think about it, because unfortunately I think too much, and that is one of the things I think about. So I can't cure it with just stop thinking. It's like telling a crack addict to just get over crack by stop taking it. I can't do it. I just overthink too much. But an antidote that I found to be very helpful for me is by learning insights. It's learning about biases, to learn about life experiences, and to reflect on my own life experiences and try to connect everything and learn core lessons and tenets that I could take to the next year and the next year after and the next experience. So continuously try to get more wise, try to be more wise beyond my age. And in that aspect, I feel like I'm doing myself a service in terms of also satisfying that curiosity. It's as if it's like a lagging indicator of whether or not I'm fulfilling the curiosity of life insights or not. Introspection, of course, comes part of it, where gleaming life insights aren't just from listening to people. It's cool hearing those lessons. But it also turns out, at least for me personally, I'm also dumb in the sense where I can't just learn the lesson by listening. I have to actively make the mistake as well. I call it touching the stove and getting burned. Many times, I need to touch a stove and get burned. But if I touch a stove and get burned, I need to look at that finger and respect or be introspective about that occurrence. Why did I touch the stove? Why was the stove hot? Was the stove on? Why did it hurt so much? Where does the pain come from? Those are all questions that will come up in this introspection, and that's what I'm optimizing for. Improvement, of course, is another, sub point in the wisdom introspection improvement. But through life, I always want to be improving. I've had that concept ever since I was a kid. I started watching those Steve Jobs commencement speeches. But this was something I always wanted. It's something I focused on in university. It's something I obsessed over in the past 2 years. And it's something I still obsess with now. How can I get better? And perhaps I obsess about this too much, where it leaks into other areas in life where I shouldn't need to ask myself whether I'm improving or not. In fact, there's many areas I'm sure in my life where I actively don't need to ask the question of whether or not I'm improving. But it just happens that I'm poisoned with that thought ever since I was a kid, and it just lives with me now. So that is something I'm optimizing for. Improvement. I want to make sure that the person I see, maybe not tomorrow, because tomorrow seems like too short of a time frame, but me in a month and me in a year or next season, I want that person to be a much better version of who I was today. I'm not solely looking on how much that person regressed or stayed the same. I want that person to be better in almost all aspects in life. And in life, I'm not talking about net worth or status at all either. But I'm talking about in the ways, at least what I'm optimizing for, that person is constantly pursuing and they're exploring curiosities, or they scratched more itches of curiosities. They become more wise and they became more introspective. They've improved in their skills. They've improved in their communication, their athletics, just everything. There is that obsession that I have with improvement, and that is something I'm optimizing for. To round out what I'm optimizing for, and perhaps this is more of a view on how I believe life should be lived, but something I'm optimizing for is the day-to-day. And I wrote an essay about this on Substack, about focusing on the present. I don't have that essay in front of me, so I'm definitely not going to recap it. But when I say a focus on the day-to-day, it's trying to optimize how good a regular Tuesday looks like. That's a Bard quote from Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss says, crushing an average Tuesday. If you were to crush an average Tuesday, what would that look like? What would you do in that average Tuesday? That is what I'm optimizing for as well. It's not that I don't care about special occasions. I think special occasions are fun. Birthdays are fun. Holidays are fun. It's great. It's nice celebrating once in a while. But admittedly, I was never really big on special occasions. Of course, I cherish the ones of my friends and family. But when it came to myself, if you asked me, what would I do on my birthday? If, let's say, I didn't owe anyone anything, because sometimes it does feel like I owe people to, or I owe my parents to like celebrate my birthday. But hypothetically, if you told me, what would you do on your birthday for yourself? My answer would be, I would live that day as if it was a normal day, because it is a normal day. I myself don't see my birthday as something special. And that's something I grew up with. That's not something that I think changed in the past year. I always had that thought. In university, I often studied on my birthday. Maybe part of it was a function of like midterms, since my birthday is in October and that's usually when midterms start. But it was like that in high school as well. There's a sense of urgency to continuously be in pursuit. And perhaps this is why I gave the second asterisk of this is who I am at 25, and I'm going to be wrong, and I'm going to be mistaken. And this is one part where I could see where I'm very mistaken. I could see where my future self, who's a little bit more filled with serotonin and just happiness, and maybe has a caring family and is looking to live less fast, or perhaps has less ambition or ambition in other ways. I could see how that person looks down at me now, or looks at me now and says, that person was wrong. That person was wrong for saying that he wants to be in constant pursuit, and pursuit is what he's optimizing for. And I totally agree with that future self of me. But this is who I am now. The person I am now is really focused on the pursuit in the day to day. It's a person who doesn't care that much about special occasions for myself. Pretty huge asterisk for myself again. Myself. I care about the daily lived experiences. And I want to have some baseline of happiness there. I don't want to live a life where the only thing I'm looking forward to is the weekends. So I'm just trudging along the workday. Monday I'm sad, Tuesday I'm sad, Wednesday I'm sad, Thursday I'm a little less sad, Friday I'm not sad because it's the weekend, and then the weekend I kind of just relax, all for Monday to start again where I'm sad again. That's not something I'm looking forward to. I'm also not looking forward for holidays. Like, not holidays, but in situations where I'm only looking forward for holidays. Well, I just said looking forward for a lot. Okay, anyways, I'm not trying to center my life around celebrating only the holidays. I want every day that I wake up, whether it be a Monday, Tuesday, whatever day, birthdays, I want to wake up, see the sun, or see the lightness of the day, and be happy that I have another fresh day to tackle, and that the things that I will do in that day are going to make me very happy. It's the optimization in the day-to-day. And of course, if there's optimization in day-to-day, there's the execution of things like a constant pursuit and the exploration of curiosities and having that wisdom, introspection, improvement on the day-to-day. That's why I enjoy. And that's it. That's what I'm optimizing for. I'm optimizing to be in constant pursuit, to explore curiosities, to be more wise, to be more introspective, to constantly improve, and to have the best day-to-day schedule or life. The best normal life. Or the best life on a normal day that I gotta have. That's what I'm optimizing for when I'm 25. Yeah. Thanks for listening. I'm curious how much I'll change in the next couple of years. I'm honestly very curious. I think I'm very aware that my concept of being constant pursuit and exploring curiosities, the wisdom, and a focus on day to day, is my understanding that these are not common things, or at least it's my hypothesis that it's not common. I haven't talked to enough people about it, at least. But at least on the outside, it seems like they're not that common. I don't know. It's when I think about this list as I'm looking at it on my screen, I'm very happy with these things that I'm being pursued. And many times it doesn't seem like I'm happy. It seems like I'm just gritting my teeth and going to go work out even though when I don't want to. Or gritting my teeth and grinding at work even though when it seems like I don't want to. But when I think about the days that I hit my head on the pillow and I feel happiest is the days in which I worked hard at something and I hit the pillow tired and drained. And there's that excitement of being able to wake up the next day refreshed and being able to hit it hard again. It's the constant pursuit. I guess I'm just like constantly going in circles now, but you get the idea. I wonder how much I'm gonna change. As I grow older, I mature a little bit, maybe start having a family. That will be something interesting to see down the line. But yeah, that's it. Let me know. I think Spotify has comments. YouTube definitely has comments. Let me know what you think. What are you optimizing for? And what does an ideal life look like? But with that said, I'll catch you next week. Eric